Hospitality 433. I find it always remarkable that we have such a high number. We're in our 10th year of doing this every week. We certainly appreciate everyone that watches us on every channel that we make available. Our TV station, Hospitality Channel. If you're watching us on TV, thank you, Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, smart TVs. So for the Hospitality Channel, live show is always on the free side of our paid gateway for a lot of other content. If you're watching us simulcasted on Facebook on multiple pages with a lot of our affiliations with associations, we're broadcasting on several industry associations pages and channels for YouTube, and also other groups of people and organizations. Thank you so much for hosting us on your platform for Facebook, for your channels in YouTube. We are also on X, formerly Twitter. We are also on LinkedIn, which would be on my profile. LinkedIn still restricts it to a single broadcast section to it. If you watch us on our app, Hospitality Channel on Apple iOS or Google Play, if you watch us online at talktravel.tv and or in our I Love Lucy rerun channel that has everything all together, our hospitalitychannel.tv. Thank you for all of that. And if you listen to us on the radio station, Hospitality Channel, or Hospitality Radio, radio station, thank you so much for that. Well, we're broadcasting our TV station in 209 countries, hence the reason why we rebroadcast this show at 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends, 11:30 a.m. Wednesdays, UK time, London, UK time for our European and Mideast friends, in the hopes that it's a little bit more reasonable. With that said, though, we get a lot of wonderful viewerships, even at the oddest of hours for them locally. They will still catch us and watch the show, and thank you so very much for that. Given the date of the broadcast and given the date of the number of the show, 433, we are just in Black Friday of 2023 for the U.S. I know internationally there are different holiday celebrations at different times and points. And I would be remiss of not saying happy holidays in general. That kind of kicked off in the U.S. for Halloween, our Canadian friends a little earlier and so forth for their Thanksgiving, what have you. So we're in that holiday quarter, that fourth quarter, that magical quarter in which there's plenty of reasons to get in front of people, plenty of reasons to spend marketing budget to get the chance for people to have you under their consideration because they're inundated with everybody else trying to do the same thing. And for that end, the tools have become very cool, very reasonable in cost, and very useful. However, and this brings us to today's topic, better tools don't always produce better results. I would say this is the current problem with AI in hospitality. It's indicative of a larger problem, not just AI, but AI is a kind of a buzz hook to tell people that we're going to be talking about the AI in hospitality, its use, disuse, misuse, in lots of different ways. But it's only one tool, really, that there's a problem with. The old saying goes that, the tools don't make the carpenter, the tools don't make the mechanic, whatever. The idea of it is that you can have all the best tools and still not be best at your craft. I say that firsthand from video and photography. I love videography and love taking pictures and videos and so forth. But I have to overcompensate for my lack of getting good pictures or getting good videos. And it's not that I don't have great equipment. It's a hobby, it's a habit. My wife, I drive her crazy with the equipment that I buy to get these videos and so forth. But she can take her phone and snap a picture that looks 100 times better than my best effort with my best gear. So the tools don't make the result. Now, I rely heavily on post-editing to make them all look better, but the origin of it isn't always the best. Now, that being said, let's apply it to hospitality. We have progressively used tools over the time that I've had the pleasure of being in hospitality, which is now spanning, 40 years, 30, 40, 30, yeah, a lot of years. Anyways, and have watched technology infuse itself. In a simple case for mine, in this instance, we used to, when we did math problems, we used graph paper. Yes, I'm that old. And we used to write down our formulas. And the graph paper gave us a visual way of defining what we were working in this area versus we're working in that area rather than a blank sheet of paper, where you can kind of scribble and slope lines and so forth. It gave you some rigidity to it, especially when it came to actual graphs of algebra, so that you had to draw and figure out the X's and the Y's and the variables and so forth. Now, that got translated when computers started rolling into our world. This is after the electric calculators started rolling into our world, where we had like Lotus and Excel. Most people don't know of Lotus. Lotus was an equal par with Microsoft's Excel as a spreadsheet platform. I liked it because it actually followed the math and the sequence of the formula, the way that you did math when you didn't have a calculator. Excel kind of did it in reverse. You had to create the formula for the result that you requested at the beginning. Any which ways, it slowly progressed. And Excel has been a mainstay in usage for any math problems and things that we do for many, many years now, decades now, that Excel has won that contest. They have exceeded what they're doing. There used to be a platform called Access, which was a database platform. All of that got absorbed into Excel. We use Excel in incredibly good ways. There's so many base functions now in Excel that used to be formulas that you would have to know how to write in Excel for the program to work. And now even we have tools that help us remember the tools. That's how much we've advanced for all that. But the point I'm making with it is it's progressed. But how we take and use the data that it uses hasn't really changed much. We still look for cause and effects and relationships and so forth. In our world, we have numbers like RevPAR, ADR, length of stay. These are math numbers. Sadly, and this is of no disrespect, but I wanted to use it as an example in our conversation today. I was talking to a person that was doing revenue management that stumbled over the answer to one of their team members asking, what is RevPAR? What is it calculated against? How does it get used? And the revenue manager kept referring to it as a number in competition to the comp set he was referring to. But the person kept insisting on, but how? What is RevPAR based on? How do you create RevPAR? What is RevPAR? And the person first stumbled over the terminology of it and then referred to revenue per available room. And then the question came back, well, does that mean all rooms that we have available or just the rooms we haven't sold or the rooms that we just sold? And the revenue manager actually stumbled over this, trying to explain what they didn't fully understand themselves. They got so used to just using RevPAR as a number that they lost the continuity of how it gets created. Now, I don't blame the person per se because they're new to the role, number one. Number two, they're being pressed for answers on things that weren't directly related to having that. But the idea that there was a fuzzy spot concerns me. The usages of our data have changed very little. We still look at our data the same way. We still look at our hotel and say how many rooms were occupied, our occupancy. How much did we charge per room, and how did that come out on the daily basis? ADR. How is our RevPAR, revenue per available room, and that is the total aggregate revenue against the number of rooms. The idea is that these numbers are still used in that format means that the way they're presented in reports stays relatively the same. Now, in our world, we have companies that want to show off that they're ahead of the other companies they're competing with. And they love to use buzz terms like innovative and forward thinking, leading edge, early adopters. They're none of those things. I wouldn't say all of them, but most of them aren't. Very, very, very few companies are willing to be the risky first person that does something. First to fail. They don't want to be first to fail. They want to be the person that can learn from the failures of other companies at their expense for their failure so that they don't have to fail as easily as the first adopters, early adopters. One of the three key questions that often get asked in any C-level or ownership group meeting is how much money can we make off of it? How much money is it going to cost us? And who else is doing it? The third question is based on the fact that if they're the first to do it, there's an inherent risk factor associated with loss. Because as bright and bold as it may sound to do this newfangled thing, whatever it may be, there's the risk of having nobody else tried and true to know whether or not it is what it is hoped to be, that its production will be what is expected based on the first two questions of cost and return of value. So a lot of times companies will back off and say, well, let's see who does this and how they do with it. Now, that can avoid certain pitfalls. Absolutely. It can mean that, whoa, so glad we didn't do that Bitcoin thing kind of mentality. And then other times missed out on, well, we should have done that sooner, but we didn't. So we're following now behind those that did, and they get the full lion's share of the early adoption benefit. And we're getting the leftovers of what we can do by mimicking them. So the idea of how we use tools is a lot to do with how we ask questions. And to ask questions means you have to already know what you're going to do with the answer. We've had this discussion. We've talked about surveys and in interviews for HR and so forth, that you want to have a clear picture of what you would do if you got an answer. What would you do with that answer? What would you do with that data? And from that, it helps you craft the question. It goes back to the ideology of genie syndrome, genie in a bottle. If you were walking down the beach and kicked a bottle and rubbed it and up popped the genie and gave you 3 wishes. There's plenty of cartoons and fun animation stories of people that think they're asking the right wish. I wish I had $1 million or whatever. But it gets twisted to a literal interpretation that's not quite the way they intended. So you have to craft an airtight wish. I would like this if it valued this and it was meant to be this and it was only for this and it was this level of and so forth. So the idea is that the result of your wish is as close to what you envisioned it as the result to be. That's the starting point to how we talk about data now. In our current world of what we're doing and how we're using things, we have had a very rapid succession of tools. As a matter of fact, our podcast is dedicated to exposing new tools and their usabilities for hospitality marketing and hospitality in general, in some cases. We've talked about ways that tools first started doing machine learning, and there was great functionality and user interface stuff and progressive use and logic string and workflows and all the things that you've heard me say many times before. And then all of a sudden, it started getting infused with the usage of AI. AI is literally like, I'm trying to think of it. Everybody wants to use AI for whatever it can be used for. Even if it's not helpful, it still wants to be infused for even just the marketing value, saying, and it's powered by AI. Okay. AI is the new manna for everyone. It's the thing that puts them into the forefront of whatever they were doing is now new because they've infused the idea that AI is being used. AI has been remarkable. AI has been incredibly helpful. AI is incredibly scary. AI is lots of things, but it isn't always the best answer to what you do, especially if you're not rethinking how you're doing it. Like I said, crafting a question, knowing what you would do with the answer means that you will craft a better question to get that answer. If we're still looking at our data the same way we have always looked at our data, the same numbers in the same format, same spreadsheet, calendar days on top, occupancies, ADRs, RevPARs, if we still look at the same reports and charts and expecting the same reports and charts, we're not looking at our data in new ways. As a matter of fact, when I talk to people about the desire of redoing reports and charts and so forth, a lot of times they end up wanting pretty much the same thing they already have. Case in point, when I first talk with clients and so forth, and we're going through the discovery process, one of the earlier questions I ask is about their reportings. But we have very aggressive reporting. We have very thorough reportings. Can I see them? We go, let's go through them. What is this report? Well, this is our daily performance report of our properties or a property, whatever context we're having it in. And you'll see the typical stuff, the ADRs, the occupancies, and so forth. Some may be a little bit more robust than others with color usage and spaghetti charts and pies and bars. And they'll talk about sometimes pace. Sometimes they'll have a comp set against it. They have their own versions of their value proposition. So I asked them, because everything is even though the data may be used the same, people put it in different flavors. How long has this program been running? Well, ever since I've been here. Wow, and how many years is that or whatever? How many people get this? Everybody, at whatever level. Okay. What do you use with it? Well, it tells me what's going on. Okay, let's get past the obvious statement that you get a report that allows you to know what's going on. Point to me on this report. What do you look at? Typical stuff. It'll eventually boil down to how do we always treat star reports. Tab 4, what's our RevPAR index compared to our comp set? It's like a benchmark. It was whether your day was going to go good or bad when the report came out with your ownership or your superiors. If you did great with the RevPAR, comp set, it was a great day. You're walking on cloud nine. If you didn't do so well, you knew you were going to have a bit of a chewing for what happened that we didn't. So they tend to gravitate to the same numbers. So then I ask, well, what's all these other numbers? Well, if I want to understand the numbers, I go look at it. So let's just take the RevPAR for the day. What do you look at if this number isn't making you happy? Well, I'm looking at what where do we have too low of a rate? Good point. Okay, what dragged down the number? Okay, or too low of an occupancy? Okay, great. Then what do you do with that? And what eventually happens is you begin to find out that the usage of the report isn't as useful because they don't do that. What will happen is for the people that get these aggregate or overview reports is they'll look and they'll see if there's something to flag, meaning different than they thought it was going to be, and hand it back to the person that they want to go fetch to find the answer. That person then, hey, boss wants to know why we're down in RevPAR for such and such, or why did we drop our rate, or why did we give that half price rate that day? What is that rate for? Been on those calls 1,000 million times of, corporate inquiry. They want to know why we had 15 promo codes used that day, or why did we have 5 comps? Sound familiar? And they look at the data the same way all the time. And then that person goes fetch, and they may spend a little bit more time with the data than the person that made them go fetch. And they might go over and look at segments. Where did these lower rates come from? What did the comp do? Were they also down? Because that's a fast answer. Hey, dude, the whole market's down that day. We got good yield compared to the demand for market that day. We got our fair share that day. It's not as bad. Yes, it's disappointing. The numbers are low, but in comparison to the whole market, we held our own. There's so many ways you give the answer to these questions. But it gets handled the same way. And what eventually finds out is that some reports are made because that's the way they've always been made. Some reports have all this data that never gets really truly used, just so it looks like there's a whole lot of data that's being used. Sometimes there's reports that actually have no actual item to them at all. It's really just a flag system of interpreting whether or not there's something to be understood. I kind of break questions down into 3 formats: discovery, answer, and decision. Discovery is looking at something and seeing something you hadn't seen before. Answer is looking for something and seeing what you have a question, don't know why, such and such a way, but you find your answer. And the third is the part where you're making a decision. This is this, and this is this. What do we have to decide on this? I'm sure there's other flavors. It's not from any book or anything. This is just how I approach questions. Is like, am I trying to discover something? Am I trying to answer something? Just that kind of mentality to Q&As when it comes to reports. So I first challenge the reports and the values of the reports. I know firsthand from both sides of the conversation, from property level all the way up to corporate level and ownership levels, reports are the bane of existence for most people. Because even though you may not be the one generating the report, you have to spend time reviewing the report should you ever be asked about the report. So even though you have 1,000 other things you need to do at the level of responsibility that you have, you can never be caught flat-footed not being aware of what a report might say. So you have to spend that time. If you're the person generating the report, usually property level and so forth, department level and so forth, it is the bane of the time consumption to produce a report. You're literally spending time talking about what you need to be doing, should be doing, or had done, when you still need to be doing all of that on top of it. So, it is always the gripe of most properties or department heads that you have your own internal reports that get used daily or whenever within the property itself. Then you have the property reports that you have to contribute to. They go upwards to management teams and so forth above your corporate level that they use for the same purpose that you're creating them for. And then those people have to recreate their reports to aggregate it with all the other reports they get from other properties to the people above them. And then the people above them have to go over and actually look at those reports to know whether they need to make people go fetch for answering questions and answers to certain things. Most days on people, as you go up, it's a taller and taller pile of reports you have to go through. And nobody at a high multi-unit level ever wants to walk into a property and being talked about something that they're not aware of because they didn't take the time to review the reports. So what ends up happening, we have mountains of reports that spend a tremendous amount of time generating data for more reports that get aggregated. With all that being said, um, AI is a wonderful, interpretive, capable tool because in this pattern of repetition with reports, a lot of times the same data is being used for the same reason for the same report. Any repetitive function can be created. We've had many discussions on RPAs, robotic programming assistants, where you basically program it to do what you do and schedule it to do it when you normally used to do it, and put the data where you want it, put it into the formulas you want to produce the document you want or the report you want that gets automatically sent the way you want, does all the stuff, just you don't have to do it and spend the time to do it. That's fine until something in the report shows up that you didn't make, that you weren't personally aware of, that you reported, that you generated, that caught everybody's attention, and you didn't spend the time because it was a time efficiency to do it that way, that now you're trying to explain something you don't have a relationship of understanding on. So there's a double-edged sword to all of this stuff. These tools are helpful when you know what you're doing. They're time-saving when you know what you're doing. But they don't replace you. They augment you. And that's where the fall down for some people's usage of it happens, is they use it to replace what they do rather than augment what they do. Whatever help you get from an RPA or an AI to do interpretive development, you should make sure it has your review of it, your policing of it, making sure that it says what it says, that there's things in it that you would see yourself had you done the report. All of those things need to still happen. Just you have less time construction demand on generating them as much. That's another conversation really today. Today is about better tools don't create better product or better results. It has been a grind of mine now for the better part of 2 years, I think, really a year and a half to 2 years, that there's been a generational educational gap in people that are in roles now. I go back to pre-COVID and post-COVID as my benchmarks, my milestones of comparison. And for hospitality before COVID, we were already dealing with a shortage of educated team members coming on board. We were short a lot of people. We were creating polarities as to those that knew what they're doing versus those that didn't. For cost efficiencies, or at least we don't have to worry about it because we have other things to worry about. A lot of lack of investment into training for a lot of companies existed. They really were looking for people. And then they were hiring people that were not hospitality focused, heart of the servant, or hospitality familiar, non-hospitality people, into roles that they were in decision-making roles. Revenue management was one of the biggest violators of this. They were bringing in data analyst specialists and math specialists that had nothing to do with hospitality. They were there about grinding numbers because owners loved numbers and they wanted the numbers to be what they wanted them to be. So now we give a revenue manager the ability to make operational decisions over perhaps a general manager that is from hospitality or a marketer that is in hospitality. And the same thing goes for marketing people. They were being brought in that they weren't hospitality marketing people and so forth. And they were making bad hospitality decisions. Case in point, the tsunami of rates when lockdown first eased off was fueled by I don't care about my guest mentality, and let's just get the highest rack rate because people are so willing to pay anything to get out of their house that we'll charge it. And we'll shut down all the amenities. We're not going to give you housekeeping. We're not going to give you restaurants or even nothing. Just you want to get out of the house, we're giving you a room and it's going to be rack rate. And they did it. And they thought they were brilliant. And they all patted themselves on the back of how cool they were that they were able to do this. And meanwhile, it destroyed their credibility as a business because the people that used to love and endear that particular hotel now were treated like nothing more than a commodity. And they reflected in the reviews and so forth. And the hotels had the indifference of, hey, we've been losing all this money because of the lockdown. We need to make money back. Sorry, we at least made it available to you. Whatever. Don't buy it if you don't want it. Disney, the old Disney mentality. So there's that. Also, too, when we came out of COVID, the lockdown, and we were looking to bring people back into the industry, we were we were exposed to what we did. We exploited people. We've had shows about this. We talked about this where people were always underpaid as a rite of passage to better times? Well, you have to pay your dues. You got to grind it out at that level before you're given an opportunity at a higher level. And then when you get to that higher level, you got to grind it out at that level if you want a higher level than that. It was always this, you got to pay your dues. You got to work for peanuts before you can finally cash in somewhere down the road. Every new job was, well, you had to prove yourself first. Every new opportunity was, well, we're going to give you the lowest rate because you don't have any experience doing it. Whatever it was, we did that. And what people realized during COVID that were good at what they did in hospitality was there was a lot of other industries because they had to find a job because we let them go so quickly, brutally at times. We have many stories about the brutality of the layoffs and the furloughs and everything else that were given, the coldness of it. Stupid companies that did that in hospitality. They found out that their skills were adaptable and actually well received to other businesses that really wanted somebody that was good at hospitality, that was personable, that had an empathy to people they were dealing with, so forth and so on. They became good managers, they became good servant, front-facing people, so forth and so on. They did a great job in other fields. So when we started saying, hey guys, lights are back on, we'd love to have you back. Hey, sorry we screwed you over a little while ago, but we're willing to do it all over again because we're one family business. Not. A lot of them go like, yeah, no thanks. No, we saw your true colors. When it came to push and shove, you just wanted to go over and hang on to the dollar in your pocket, and you bailed us out. You kicked us out. You didn't take care of us. Some companies that did take care of their teams, not a problem in the world. Everybody came back open-armed, and they did great for that. But a lot of companies that didn't do that didn't get the benefit of it. So we get brought in now more people with zero experience. Now, I've always purported that I loved bringing in people in certain roles being the key, that had no previous hotel experience because they had a wonderful, naive perception from the guest perspective that I wanted to cherish as long as we could have it before we tainted it with an awareness of how the operations work and the excuses that come with the awareness of, well, there's nobody behind the front desk because it's changed a shift or whatever it is, and they're only down to one person because it's mid-afternoon or whatever it is. Stop all that and just say, there should be somebody behind the front desk, right? That's why it was enjoyable to go and bring people on that had not come from hospitality and to see whether they had that heart of the servant that it made them feel happy when they gave good service to another person. It was a wonderful, rewarding opportunity when I was GM and department head or whatever to be able to bring those people in. But unfortunately, the gaps in what we needed as an industry went all the way up. And anybody that had any experience in one thing was immediately pushed into a larger role in another thing. Now, this goes a little bit back to how we handle things in COVID and the lockdown, where we had to cull down the people that were doing the work. So now a revenue manager was doing marketing because the marketing person was let go. Right? You can do revenue and marketing at the same time because we're so in need. And if you want to keep your job, you're going to take it. You're not going to take much of an income or any increase, if any at all. Just lucky you have your job. And a lot of people did that. And they became DSOM or they did DRM or whatever. And they were not really qualified for the role, but they were cheaper. There were times that were people that were higher salary that were doing good in their role were let go, and an underling who was cheaper was put in their role. They had to do it in a way that the person can go, hey, wait a minute, you fired me just because of, and I'm going to sue you. They had to do it as a realignment of, well, it's COVID, we had to let people go. We're going to make a new role, and this underling of yours is now going to be revenue, your role plus this role. And so it's not the same role you would have had, and we don't think you're as qualified for that as them and whatever. And meanwhile, they go to the underling and go, look, you're lucky you have a job. This is all we're going to pay you, and you're going to do all these other jobs. What it did was it created a gap point in education. All of this long story is about gap points in education. Training and investment into your team is one of the first things that gets cut out of a budget in good times and in bad times. It's sad to say, but both breed it. It would be wonderful to think that companies that are flush with cash realize the value of reinvesting into their team. They don't. They look at it this way. The more they invest in the team, the more sellable they make them, the more likely they are to leave. So let's keep them reliant and dependent upon us. And it's the absolute reverse, but dumb companies run dumb things. So they don't invest. And when you're cost cutting and everything else, any of these extra things like training and everything, that goes out the window almost. That's one of the first cuts when it comes to reducing costs. Like literally in budgets, if you start reducing the cash flow, attendance at conferences, trade shows, training, parties, investing into things, and that hits the cutting room floor right away. So you have all these people that got pushed into roles that they weren't trained for the reasons I just mentioned. And they couldn't find qualified people to displace those people and put them back in a more equitable role that they do have skills for. And besides that, even if they found somebody that was better trained, they probably wanted more money, and they already had you or that person in the role, and they were running the role. They got the title, so they must be at it now. So we don't need to replace them. We need to find other people. And they kind of looked at it that way. It's like, well, why do we replace somebody we already have when we still need all these people we don't have? Let's get the people we don't have first, and then we can look at improving our team members um, in such a way that we can improve who we have in the roles. So we get this gap of people that have titles, and what they don't have is education. So when you're dealing with them, and I find this to be always the case in coming across people like this, is that you assume that they know something because of their title that they don't. And there's a gap because now they're in a role that they can't ask the innocently naive question or the I can't believe they wouldn't know that question. And so they don't. They just act like they know it. So now they're making decisions on things that they're not fully informed on. Why am I bringing all this up? We have actually talked about this before months ago. Bring it back up again because what's happened now is our tools have improved. We have really cool tools, and these people are being presented these tools. Like we can redefine your reporting and analytics. We can redefine your marketing strategy. We can augment what you're doing in these departments that you're in charge of with these tools better. Problem is, they don't know how to ask the right question, which means actually they don't know what to do with the answer. They're only familiar with what they do, with what they've been using. They haven't been educated on the values of how all these things work, where it came from in such a way that they understand how it's all put together. My best case example of that is ask anybody, food and beverage director, director of sales, or even a revenue manager. Ask them in your department, math me out a displacement analysis of this group versus this group, and see what they say. See what they answer to. Those with experience used to take a piece of paper in a meeting when they were asked that. And food and beverage director, which I was at the time, it's like, okay, so we have how many heads, how much food, and if we don't do that compared to the rate you're offering them for just a group block rate for people that don't have it, what's the displacement analysis? We're giving them a lower rate, but we're getting all this ancillary revenue. What's the displacement analysis compared to somebody that isn't doing the same? A lot of people don't know how to math that out, but it's a useful tool. That's my best example of missing skill sets. So here we have these tools. We have AI. We can literally ask the genie in the bottle anything. If we give it the right data, if we give it our data and we say, all right, ask it anything, you'd be surprised that people don't know how to ask it. They don't know what to ask. They truly don't know what to ask. They revert back to what I was talking about before, where there's X's and O's. There's my Excel spread chart with RevPAR, occupancy, ADRs. They're riveted into what they are only been exposed to. It's kind of like coming down in a spaceship to a civilization that is chasing woolly mammoths around and handing them the keys to the spaceship, and all they're worried about is sparking against a rock to make a fire. They're missing the true value of what's being offered. These tools can do so much if you ask the right questions, and that's where we run into this gap point. And I'm not saying this in detriment to any of my current clients. I talk to many people that ask for advice and so forth, where I ask these same open-ended questions. They're like, well, how do we use AI? Now, it's fun when AI first started rolling out last November, which has now been a year, where people were first getting exposed publicly to what ChatGPT could have done, does do, so forth. And they were asking us silly questions, and we had made the news where, ChatGPT would answer oddly and so forth, and we didn't know what to do with it. It was a play toy. And the questions were silly. Strangely enough, all of the CEOs and leadership roles that want to use AI, they don't know how to get past the silly questions. They don't know how to use progressive prompt development for data interpretation. They don't know how to translate their earnest desire to be that company that says, oh yeah, we use AI. We use it all the time for this, that, and the other thing. They so desperately want to have those bragging rights, but they don't want to be the first to do it because of the risk factor of not doing it well or making it profitable, because that's always the bottom line in their world. And by the same token, they don't know what it means. So here we have these great tools that are capable of doing some amazing things, but we don't know how to ask it questions. And I talk to people that ask investors, so what kind of reporting are you doing? Great. What would you want the report to tell you? Silence. I said, wait a minute. You're frustrated that your report takes you so long to look at things to understand what it's telling you. Like, okay, I have 30 days of ADRs, 30 days of length of stay, 30 days of room types, 30 days of all this data. Okay, what am I supposed to see in it? What? I'm looking at this huge chart, multiple charts, multiple tabs of charts. What am I missing? What am I supposed to see in this data? So the first request of most people when they have this data is to put it into a format that summarizes it, aggregates it. Here's a pie chart that shows you all of the channel contributions of this, 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 and this. Here's another pie chart that shows you the markets or the devices that they came from. What am I supposed to do with that? I can see the mobile has a lot of traffic, but it has the least conversion. What does that mean for me? I see that desktop has better conversion, but lower traffic. What does it mean for me? I see that my meta search is producing 14%. What does that mean to me? Not knowing what to look for means you can't ask the question correctly to get the answer that's most helpful. And that's where we draw it down. So somebody says, oh, well, AI can figure that all out. AI needs to be told. A friend of mine, AI is a child. It knows everything, but it doesn't know what you want. How you ask it is how you get the answer. Genie in the bottle. You have to ask the question in such a way that the answer is useful. For the answer to be useful, you need to know what answer type you would want, so you ask the right question so you get the answer that's useful. It's a 3-step process. Through that, you can go to, and this is where we go to the childlike wonder of AI. We go to ChatGPT, and without giving it any specific data, we try to ask it a question as if it understands why we're asking the question. Well, what can I do to make my hotel more profitable? And what it'll do is we'll look out at everything it sees in every which way equally valuable, cull it down to what's most applicable, divide it down to what's most useful, segment it down to what's to be said, word to next word to next word to next word. It doesn't mean that it's the answer you want. It's the answer that it found to give you a reply to your query. Better questions mean better answers. Better usages of the answer means better questions. That process of understanding how to develop prompts, and some people have gotten cutesy with it. Like if I was a world famous hospitality marketer and I was looking at this hotel, blah, 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 by name, website, link, so forth, and I wanted to give it 5 points of the fastest ways for it to do better business the summer of 2024, what would I tell them? I've seriously watched people make these questions. It's cute. It's a cute question. The answer, almost completely irrelevant because it's a feel-good answer. Well, I would go over and focus on people that are most interested in traveling your destination. I would go over and take where they're coming from. That's great. Thank you, Captain Obvious AI, but it doesn't give you actionable things. It may reaffirm what you're looking for, but it doesn't necessarily give you an actionable thing. So what you need to do with these new wonderful tools is understand that the people asking the questions need to be trained. They need to understand what they want before asking what they need. They need to understand the mechanics of the data in a way that they don't currently look at it. Taking the example of the overwhelming spreadsheet that has tabs and columns and rows, and here's data on occupancies, RevPARs, sources of business, device types, channel contributions, all this other stuff. Take that data, identify the data. This data is this by name. This data is this by name. Now you can use the columns and the rows headers. You can use the tab names, whatever you want, but you create a string of continuity. You don't try to get an answer, a complete answer with one question. It's a progression of questions. Way back, even before me. You ever hear about the 20 questions? Is bigger than bread box, because you're trying to, and you have 20 questions or less to determine what it is that the person's talking about. Think of it in terms like that as a progression of questions. Let's first identify the data that we want to refer to. And by name, I come up with what we were referring to. So you take this massive spread chart that you have, and you go in and say, this is our data source that we will use for the following queries. And you give it access to it. Now, everything we do, I want the data to be put into this location. That's your source data that you're pushing it into. I want to use this data with the following criteria. This column is by name, is to be used as a reference to this. And you identify what you're going to be putting into a new spreadsheet that's literally saying source data, identification of data, use of data, and you progress that. These results from this prompt query will be placed in this location under the labeled name of X. And you do that, and then the next prompt you make, it says, using the database from X, I want it to be used against this other data source, maybe other spreadsheets or another tab of the spreadsheets that's different in the sense of what the data that you're asking to be compared against, and saying, I want it to be used against this. These are the IDs that I have labeled in this one. I want those to be used for these values against this X data that came from this other prompt. Then and I want it all to be put into this source over here under source Y. The third prompt, using the data source of Y, being compared to this data. You see how the progression goes? It might take 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, whatever. Progressive things. And you may think, oh my God, this is going to take forever. Building the structure of it does take the time. Once it's built, it takes a fraction of a second for the results. Because once you've built the construct of the prompts to the conclusive answer that you find useful, it's just replacing the data source that it uses based on the query that you're asking, and or perhaps just asking the same query over and over again because the data is perpetually updated. The sources of the data constantly get fed new. Think of it this way. When you go pull your reports off of your PMS system or your online booking engine or whatever it is, and you pull it into a Google Sheet, let's say, and you constantly refer to that sheet as it gets updated as the source of data for your entire prompt sequence, then you'll always be able to ask a newly relevant AI question. We're beginning to see AI tools come out like this, where they are knowing, because of the construct, what you're trying to get to. So you just have to give it what it needs to create the construct. They're in their infancy. They're not directly applicable to hospitality quite yet. Actually working on one. But the idea is to be able to ask long language models. The idea of language models is that you can now use terminology that you've defined earlier in your prompt sequences. So you don't have to refer to the very long prompt you create. You label that prompt as a long language sequence. Use prompt 1 when calculating such and such. It's even more simpler than that. But the idea of it is that the long language is just a shortcut to the longhand that you just did. You can create insights. So now if you're getting your data automatically fed, auto being where you use an RPA and pull the data, robotic programming assistant, pulls the data and puts it into a source that you've identified into your prompt sequence. And then you create long language models that are specific questions. Like, what was my best performing day last month? Now, this is a bad example because what would you do with it if you had the answer? But let's just follow me on the prompt sequence. It would come back and say, October 16th, you had your best ADR. October 21st, you had your best RevPAR. October 6th, you had your best occupancy. Okay. See how the genie in the bottle works? You asked for the best day, but you didn't define what the best day meant. Now, if you create a long language model that says, what is my best performing day overall? And overall was defined as your ADR, occupancy, RevPAR, whatever. It would give you just a single answer. See, that's that genie in the bottle. You wanted an answer, but you weren't clear on what you were defining as what you wanted. So therefore it gave you multiple answers. If you start creating long models like this, what it does is that you get reduced down to a series of questions that you want answers to because you know what to do with the answer. And going back to my 3 types of questions, whether it's discovery, education, or action, these are the action ones. These are the ones that say, with this answer, I'm going to make a decision or a function happen. Like if there was a sequence that you did in Create Language and it did an insight and say, what's my poor performance this month representative of? And it says, your paid campaign conversions are down 0.5% compared to period over period or year over year, whatever you'd created the prompt in. Yet your cost per click has gone up 14%. Your channel contribution required of that is usually 15%, and it's down 11%. Whatever Now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, our paid campaigns seem to be running stale. Let's go take a look at paid campaigns. Hey, AI. I wonder what I'm going to call my AI. I haven't come up with a name for my AI. What ad campaign is running less than expected? What's our goal set? And those goes to KPIs. What is our thresholds? It should be performing at this level or below, not below this level. And if it goes above this level, I should be notified. All of that kind of investment of time. And it might say, campaign B, drive market is lower by 15%. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting answers. Now, this is the same data that you would have spent time looking. Okay, looks like paid performance is down. Go to tab 12. Tab 12, paid performance. Okay, 10 campaigns. Which campaign's down? Ooh, campaign 2 is down. What's my campaign 2? Campaign 2 is, drive market. Oh, it's the same data. But what you've done is you've created a model for a simple request with a very specific intended answer. You knew what to do with the answer. So you made a good prompt, a good question, which is long language model, which created a great series of prompts based on what we just talked about. There now is a useful tool that helps even those people that are not particularly trained in how all of this works together. Because now anybody can ask those questions. A revenue manager can go and look at marketing and say, what is our least performing market channel right now? Maybe it's, and you have his long language model question inquiry, and it'll show why. The iteration of this beyond, of course, is fun stuff where you talk about where it offers solutions, where it'll tell you how to fix it, where it'll tell you how to improve something. And this is where they get really crazy because it's not about reporting forensically back this type of data, which is what we talked up to this point. What's my best performance? What's my best channel? What's my least performance? These are forensic reviews. This is, even though it's with current data up to the time you're asking, it's about historically looking and evaluating at things that have already occurred. The real value is taking this and going forward, not in a forecast of are we at pace for January or something like this, but rather giving it enough sources of data, your comp sets performances, metrics that you want to measure from those, traffic demands to your market, your destinations, traffic, keywords that are being used, volume of traffic compared over time sequences to know whether or not that's trending, outside data sources like weather impact, political impact, airlift impact. These are all data sources. You start putting this all together, and you start creating the HAL 9000 out of 2001: Space Odyssey. Because now you have an active engagement of giving it all this data. It can do two things. One, it can tell you what you need to be aware of before it turns into a bigger issue. Like, hey, it looks like the weather forecast for January is terrible. It looks like your comp set is already doing better in performance markets, so forth and so on. They have more specials being offered. They have more performance in social, whatever you've given this data. You need to do something now to correct for the fact that demand for your market will be down, and you need to get as much lion's share of that as possible. It will notify you those ways, but also it'll start giving you answers to things. So it'll notify you about things to be expecting, and it'll also give you answers to possibilities of how to solve those things. That's the real crazy part about the tools we have. That's the spaceship that landed when you're handing somebody the keys. This is what it can do. The problem is we're using it to just regenerate the same reports. My example where I go and talk to people and they're asking, and the first thing I ask them about reports and so forth, when I start asking them what they need out of a report, they basically tell me the same report's data. Well, I need to know my RevPAR, and I need to know it on a daily basis, and I need to know whether or not our occupancy influenced it versus our ADR. I need to see how it compares to year over year to whether or not we're behind or above on pace. And I'm literally like, it looks like this, and like, yeah, it's the same report. You're literally restricting yourself to your awareness of your data based on how the data is presented to you. I always ask the bigger question, what would you do with different data? And I get this blind stare because they don't know. They don't know what to ask for because they don't know what's capable of being asked. You know, we don't go around and say, well, I'd love to go visit another galaxy. Well, not knowing that we could, but we don't know. The idea is you don't know what to ask for unless you know what's possible. You don't know what's possible if you can't get past the constructs of what you're dealing with data. If you could ask any question like, what should I do about being 100% occupancy tomorrow? Don't you think that would be asked all the time? Because you'd want to know. The problem is the answer would be not much, because if you're only asking the day before, there's not much you can do about it. I just gave away the rooms. Remember, you asked the question about 100% occupancy. Give away the rooms, you get full. If you're asking about how to be full during Christmas of 2024, now you have a chance to have runway that you have lots of variables. And if you construct prompt sequences that give good, accurate, specific data and define it to only that data, and take out the outside, take in the outside sources that have relevant data, specific relevant data, and put it into a sequence that cumulatively builds data that's usable by the next prompt after it, you can get to a solution that you can create a long language query for, so that when you ask that question, you will always get an answer that's relevant based on the construct of what came to that answer. So if you say, how can I be 100% occupancy Christmas next year? It could tell you that you need to start selling at these rates, perhaps, by this time on this channel, and spend this much on that channel with this messaging, with these rates, and it'll sell out by this time. It will get that good. And it has already begun to get in that direction to be that good. The gap point is the people that are running these things are confined by their limited education and knowledge. They're confined by their lack of understanding how the whole processes work, so they don't get to ask bigger questions because they understand how it's made. So how can we make it better? They only know how it performs. How can it perform better is not a solution. Think of it this way. You have a guy in a car, racetrack, going around the track. The driver knows to make the car go faster, he pushes the gas pedal down. That's how he knows to make the car go faster. The mechanic of the car knows how to change the settings and the mechanical capabilities of the engine so that it can go faster in spite of how far the gas pedal goes down. He knows how to actually make the machine do better than the person that's running the machine. That's our problem right now. We have a lot of drivers, not a lot of mechanics. They know they can push the gas pedal down, but if they have the gas pedal all the way down for what they don't know of any other way to make it go faster. Where a mechanic could be like, yeah, I think we did this, and this, we can make it go faster, if even that past the point where the gas pedal's all the way down. That's the difference we're dealing with how these things can construct. So I can only admonish that if you don't think you know everything that you deal with every day, learn it. If you think there's a field, we should be infinitely curious. Why is it that way? How is it that way? What do we use that for? Is it as useful as we want it to be? Who is using it? Asking these questions about our reporting and analytics. What does that number tell me? Is it a useful number, not a useful number? If I could ask any question, what kind of question would I ask that would be reasonable to act on? What would I want to be told if I'm not seeing it regularly, like where I see cracks of things that are happening? Hindsight's 2020, right? Oh, if we looked farther back, we would have seen that happening before it actually happened. Great. We have tools now that can begin to help us with that, but we have to ask the right question. In this whole process, is the best benefit is having somebody that understands the mechanics of what you're doing, how these things work, where they work, what's the value of numbers, so that they can ask better questions because they know what kind of answer they want. So they ask the question that gives them the best answer. I believe that has focused in on my efforts of better tools don't always produce better results. The current problem with AI in hospitality is we're using AI as a blunt instrument. We're using it in superficial single answer, single question queries. We're not looking at the depth of its true value proposition if we provide the constructs that it can be truly useful rather than just novel. We need to go and define how best to train our teams to understand what it is they're asking for by them understanding why they are asking for it and what would they do with it should they have it. That's a fundamental training shift, not just exposure to awarenesses of things, which is usually the checkbox training that goes on, learning terminology, learning definitions, and then they leave it for not teaching people how to use those things, to how to calculate displacement of a group compared to another group, to not calculate GOPAR, to not calculate channeled contribution based on percentage, based on cost, based on value. These are the things that need to be trained. They have to understand how they work together, not just the fact they push the gas pedal down and go, that they understand the mechanics behind them in the car, to know by adjusting the fuel injection, adjusting the gear ratios, whatever it may be, can make as much of a difference to the speed of the car as their ability to push a gas pedal down. So with that, I appreciate your time, especially during this holiday weekend. Those that are involved deeply into their marketing strategies for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I wish you every success. It is a fun time for that to be the case. It is exciting because the efforts versus successes, or lack thereof, sometimes are immediate because of the focus, the crucible that you're in right now. You're fighting for every eyeball on your product as you can, and so is everybody else. So your efforts are almost eminently immediately rewarded because you've created the fences that says if you don't take advantage of it now, it won't be available tomorrow. So people have to make decisions now. You pushed them into the bottom of the ZMOD. For those that did their proper research and education, it's simply a matter of waiting to see if the offer is good enough to pull the trigger. For others, it's a start from the beginning and hope that they get to a point where they can make a decision before the offer gets taken off the table. In both cases, you can target both. In both cases, there can be success. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then find somebody who does. To that end, thank you so much for watching on our TV channel, Hospitality Channel. For those who are listening to us on our rebroadcast on all the social platforms, thank you so much for watching our rebroadcast. For those watching our rebroadcast of this show in your time zone in the Asia Pacific region and or the UK or Mideast, thank you so much for catching us at 11:30 a.m. Wednesday mornings. And of course, you will catch our podcast, our audio podcast, which is also on our Hospitality Radio station. But our podcasts are on 39 platforms, also all around the world, and translated in 11 languages. And we will be talking about some tools related to translating what we just talked about with prompt generation and AI usages and forecasting and functionalities on today's podcast. So catch out podcast 433 if you get the chance. So with that, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.